All right, 102. I'm just going to go ahead and get started. Just letting everybody know this session is recorded. We are planning to share the recording after the session is completed, and you can watch it on our YouTube channel. I'll make sure everybody has access to that. Everybody joined, and everybody who is registered who wasn't able to join. And I'm going to make sure everybody has access to the slides again. Again, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks everybody for your participation and your interest. I do just want to state and make clear this session is generously sponsored by CMHC, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. Just to start, my name is Nathan Hill. I'm the infrastructure supervisor at the Ontario First Nations Technical Services Corporation. This session is specific new construction inspection stages. I am I guess, qualified inspector here in the province of Ontario, a certified building code official through our provincial building official organization. Just throughout the session, if you can have your mic muted, it makes it easier. I'm open to questions at any time. I don't we don't have to necessarily wait to the end. I don't want anybody to miss an opportunity to ask a question. So please feel free to utilize the chat, put a question in there, or um, uh, unmute and we can have a discussion at any time. And again, this session is recorded and the slides will be shared with all attendees who registered and everyone who's joined the session here today. Just basically, I'd like to highlight the sessions for information purposes only. It's not meant to, I guess, provide guidance or qualify anybody who's looking to become a qualified inspector. This is kind of intended for maybe people who are completing inspections or working in a First Nation community where um, you're responsible for ensuring units are inspected. Just highlighting some of those stages where inspections are typically required. There's a lot more that would go into it if somebody's looking to become qualified as an inspector. Um, and specifically, this is for on reserve new construction, specifically as it relates to residential. Residential, like a single family dwelling. There's a lot of maybe some stages that might differ for uh, like a duplex, a triplex, a multi-unit building. There is a bit of information on that as well, but I guess just for context, just think if you think of it as a single family dwelling, what most might be familiar with, that's basically the content of this presentation. And again, this isn't necessarily intended as a um, I know it's going to vary from community to community, from region to region, jurisdiction across the country here. So this is just as a guide, similar, basically how I would view a project, how I would complete inspections, how we would complete inspections here at OFNTSC, and it might vary from a little bit from region to region, and project to project in the way they're designed. Some of the stages may not be necessary. There may be other stages. So we're going to touch on some of that as well. I guess, again, the main purpose is to provide a general overview of the inspection process for, again, that kind of single family dwelling. This is just a slide just about our organization. It'll be in the slides that everyone gets, and all of the information is available on our website if you're interested about who we are. Um, so you might see in the slides the term infrastructure specialist. That's specific to us here at OFNTSC. That's the job title of our team, who would be responsible for completing inspections. So again, in your mind, feel free to use that term interchangeably with inspector, whatever uh, I guess title or that person might have in your region or in your jurisdiction. Um, if you ever heard the term authority having jurisdiction or that acronym, essentially that would be the First Nation community, and they're the ones who would determine what units are being constructed, the design of those units, and ultimately the stages of inspection. Generally, it's going to default to what's required, as per the person's training, as per the training specific to their region. But again, it ultimately is going to fall on the First Nation community as the authority having jurisdiction, and they're going to make that final determination. Um, the other thing to kind of keep in mind that I think is very important, and it should be clearly indicated from the start of a project, is which code or standard the homes are expected to meet. Um, Again, that's the determination of the First Nation community. That's not my determination as an inspector or an infrastructure specialist. That's specifically of the First Nation as the owner of the project, as the owner of the of the building. They're the ones who are going to make that determination, and it should be made clear from the start of the project. Um, I guess just some examples kind of from across the country, the National Building Code or some of the provincial standards, provincial codes. Specifically here in Ontario, within the last couple of years, we've transitioned to the 2024 Ontario Building Code. Um, and there's a number of changes to, um, I guess, reduce the number of differences between the Ontario Building Code and the National Building Code, at least for us here in Ontario. So again, it's not necessarily that I would consider any one of these standards superior or better than any other, or that I would recommend utilizing one over the other. The main consideration is that it should be clearly identified in drawings, in construction documents, which standard the building is designed to meet and what standard the building is being constructed to meet. Whether that's the National Building Code, whether that's a provincial standard for your region, it's very important to make that clearly identified at the start of the project, and not necessarily uh, trying to meet more than one, because there are differences. There are differences. Here in Ontario, it's not something where you're gonna construct to meet the National Building Code and the Ontario Building Code. There are differences. There's a lot of similarities, and like I mentioned, there were changes to make, uh, I guess, the Ontario Building Code align closer to the National Building Code, but there are still differences, and it shouldn't be if in the middle of a project we're trying to meet either the National Building Code or a specific regional building code. It should be clearly identified at the start of the project. The designer should be aware of that. The contractors, the builders, the subcontractors, the First Nation, the housing department, the the technical advisor, the inspector. They should all be made aware of which code this building is expected to meet. And again, that should be available in drawings and construction documents. Um, there are, I guess, differences for maybe like a modular type project, and I'll get to that. There is a bit of information on that as well, just something to keep in mind. And I guess something that I've always encouraged communities to do is that they are, as the authority having jurisdiction, as the owners of these buildings in their territory, they're able to develop their own standards and specifications in addition to these codes and documents. I would not recommend standards or specifications to supersede any of these codes, but it's supplementing, it's adding to these, right? If there's specific issues you're having in your territory, in your region, um, you can develop some pretty simple construction standards and documents. And some of the communities we've had the privilege to work with here in in Southern Ontario, they have that. They have that in place, and it doesn't have to be a complicated document, a complicated set of standards. But if you're in a territory where um, for a lot of communities we work with, a high water table is an issue. So designing and constructing a building with a basement that meets the requirements of the code, maybe that's not going to work. So maybe you're not constructing basins. Maybe you're sticking to slab on grade. Maybe you're sticking to some other types of construction, some other types of standards. And then if you're just relying on the building code, the national building code, any provincial code, um, you're still um, I guess open to some of those issues arising during construction. So it's just yeah, something I've always encouraged communities to develop some of those standards on their own. And it's something that they can develop over time. It doesn't have to be a perfect document the first time. You can add to it, you can take away from it, you can um, um, evolve. It can evolve as it grows, but it's something that's I think is very powerful, very useful for a community to have. But again, something that should be clearly indicated from the start of a project that we're constructing to whichever building code, doesn't have to be one list, but a code, and we have our own standards in addition to that, and um, that's what we're willing to accept in our territory. So that's something that makes it very has the makings of a project to be very smooth in its as it goes along. All right, so now I'm just kind of highlight those inspection stages that again our infrastructure specialists would typically be on site for. Again, it's not I guess a comprehensive list in that someone has to be on site for all these stages for every single project. So just as an example, plans evaluation is vital is vitally important in that the person doesn't necessarily have to be the same person, but it does make it easier in that they are familiar with the project before they arrive on site, and they can review the set of drawings to identify potential issues or errors or deficiencies prior to arriving on site, prior to construction commencing, which is vitally important in that sometimes some things that might get missed. Maybe there's something missing from the set of drawings. Maybe there's some sort of communication issue and that something might be missing. It's vitally important that the inspector, infrastructure specialist, qualified person, whoever that is that they have an opportunity to review a set of drawings prior to construction. Um, I guess the other thing that I touched on earlier, but I'm gonna get to it closer to the end is some of these stages may not, I guess they may not exist in a modular or prefabricated building where it's something that you're having delivered to your community from a large municipality, a large city. Um, these inspections would still take place generally at the factory or where these buildings are constructed, and you should receive information on those 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 points of inspection. But it may not necessarily be the same person who's inspecting the final installation on site. Generally, it would be somebody from that region or somebody from that um, area. Um,
I
so
have a
yeah,
quick
and again,
question.
there's going to be. Oh, sorry, I thought I heard somebody.
Yeah, I
Hello.
have a quick question about how do you deal with tiny homes?
I guess tiny homes. I guess for me, I'm gonna stick to I guess again my qualifications and expertise here in Ontario. So um I mean, tiny homes are something that's very popular. It's something that's very, um, I don't know, a lot of communities, a lot of, not even just communities. These are across the country. People are flocking to these, and they're, I guess, a solution uh, if somebody needs a home. In my opinion, I guess in my training. There's no specific criteria for I guess the construction of a tiny home for the anywhere in the Ontario Building Code. It still has to meet the parameters of the Ontario Building Code. So generally, if you're and I'm just off the top of my head, I'm thinking of some of the some tiny homes that you might see on TV, and they have a ladder to this loft and all of this. Um, you still have if you have another story in you still have to have stairs, you still have to have handrails, you still like you're not exempt from requirements of the code because you want to refer to it as a tiny home. That's the way I've always kind of looked at it. Like you still have to, it still has to be safe. It still has to meet area requirements for rooms and widths of hallways and area for bathrooms and ceiling heights and stairs and all that sort of thing. So it doesn't, it, I guess calling something a tiny home doesn't make it exempt from having to meet, say, the building code. Does that does that kind of answer your question there?
Yeah,
Sure.
I was just curious because, you know, I think it's the OBC that defines a building as greater than 10 meters or
Yeah.
so it's in that case, a tiny home doesn't meet the criteria of being a building.
Yeah, and that's it. Like if it's if for like you said, Ontario specifically, if they're under some of these dimensions, then it's not you're not going to have to meet that the requirements of the code. But in my opinion, it should still be done safely, right? And I would think everybody on this meeting here and everybody working in the communities would agree with that it still should be done in a safe and uh, to make sure that the people occupying this are healthy and safe, right?
Yeah, I was just curious as to like whether or not you inspect them or not.
We've had the opportunity to inspect a few of them, and generally that's the issue I find is that it if it's a if you're over that 10 square meters, that's the value. Um, just because someone's calling it a tiny home, just because you're calling it a certain I guess a description, doesn't exempt it from meeting the requirements of the code. There's no special part of the code for, oh, it's a tiny home, so now we got to look here. Like it still has to meet all of these requirements, right?
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
yeah. Um, Okay, so I am going to touch on all of these slides, so I won't. I don't know. I guess the one thing here, rough-ins, like it's kind of listed rough-ins here, and I'll get into more detail on that um, as we uh, as we get to that point of the presentation. Da-da-dum. So these are just some, I guess, other inspection stages. Um, Electrical. So for me, I'm not a qualified electrician. I'm not a electrical inspector for here in the province of Ontario. Electrical inspections are completed by Electrical Safety Authority. They're the ones ensuring compliance, locations, type of wiring, all that installation, all that sort of stuff. That's not something that I'm inspecting. Things that are regulated under the building code, at least in here in Ontario, national building code type of thing, location of smoke alarms, right? Those are installed by an electrician, but those are also indicated in the building code as far as where they have to be installed, how they have to be installed, the type of smoke alarm, the the audible, visual signals, all that sort of stuff. So that's still something that I'm looking for as part of an inspection. Um, so that would be at the rough-in stage to make sure that they have a rough-in for those smoke alarms, but also at the final to make sure that they're installed, to make sure they're the right type of smoke alarm, make sure they're the right um, yeah, I guess type of alarm. Uh, Something like septic. Generally, it's not our again our inspection. That's generally um, out of our hands when when they're installing a septic system. Most of our group have gone through the qualification and I guess written exams to be qualified for the inspection of a septic Part 8 here in Ontario. So we may comment on certain things if there are issues, but it's generally not, we're not the ones signing off on compliance. Underground plumbing, so in that instance, that might be in a basement, or if you have like a slab on grade type installation, um, it that might fall outside of some of those other stages that we saw earlier, but it's still something that should be inspected before they're pouring concrete over top of it. If they have a rough in a basement, or again for a slab on grade where there's plumbing under the slab, um, generally I'd go out there and inspect that. And again, that's in addition to some of those other stages that we saw. Wet inspections, so wood energy technology transfer. So that's solid fuel burning appliance, a wood stove, uh, fireplace insert, pellet stove. Um, I mean, you don't really see new wood furnaces, anything like that, but at least I don't. Um, but generally, that's separate from those initial stages that we saw. But at least a few of us from our team here at OFNTSC are qualified and would generally inspect the installation of a new appliance. Um, for the context of this presentation. And then fire separations. So that's one where when you're into a multi-unit building, like a duplex or a triplex, or anything where there's going to be fire separations between units, whether those are vertical fire separation, like a wall between two units, or if you have one building on top of another and you have, or one unit on top of another, and you have horizontal fire separations where like a floor ceiling would be act as a fire separation. Um, Again, that's something where we're there at framing, but you might be there at some other stages to make sure that whether they're installing 5/8 type X drywall, resilient channel, insulation, like all that sort of stuff. However, that fire separation, however that assembly is designed, it may require an additional inspection to make sure that it's installed properly. Because once you're into drywall, some of that stuff might be concealed, and you might miss the opportunity for some of those. Um, the other one I wanted to, I guess, touch on and be specific, we're specific to in our region here, like a CMHC Section 95 project, where you would require a certificate of code compliance at these stages. Um, it's it's important. It's very important to make sure that you have a qualified person inspect at those stages so that when your project is completed, that you can provide that certificate of code compliance. We have received requests in the past for a unit's done, and maybe we haven't had the opportunity to inspect those other stages, and it's simply too much liability. It's difficult for us to provide a certificate of code compliance for a stage where we weren't on site for the inspection. So prior to backfill, prior to drywall, if some of those are concealed, it just makes it a kind of impossible for us to provide a code compliance for those stages. So it's again just very important to make sure that inspections are scheduled for these type of inspections when they're necessary. So plans evaluation. So again, a set of drawings should be completed by a qualified person, a qualified designer, whether that's here in Ontario, somebody with a BCIN building code identification number, an architect, an engineer, whoever that qualified person is, um, would be the one providing the set of drawings. And then for review, again, prior to construction, um, and it should have every floor plan, deep elevations, sections, any of those, uh, everything that you would need for a construction project. Again, there are what a set of drawings is required to contain. I know that does exist. Unfortunately, we do not have the time to cover all of it. And again, they should be, I guess, identified the qualified designer, qualified individual who designed them, and they're, if there's changes required, that should be available. It's often difficult if a set of drawings is obtained from another region or another territory. So I'm thinking here in Ontario, where a set of drawings is obtained from the United States or from another province. It's often not designed to meet the requirements for here in Ontario. So it just makes it difficult to if you're making some of those adjustments on site, as far as insulation or design, any of that stuff, it just makes it difficult. So my recommendation is always to have a set of drawings specific to the region, to the territory, by that qualified person, and that um, you're not dealing with those, I guess, changes or having to make changes during construction. Um, oh boy. All right. Site inspection. Um, so I guess this, you might consider prior to like footings being installed. I've heard, site layout, site like there's a lot of ways to consider it, but for the purposes of this, you would consider this like before footings are installed, excavation completed, free of standing water, organic material. So maybe like soil type, the water table depth. Some of that's going to depend on like local knowledge. Again, the First Nation may be familiar with, I guess, the water table depth at certain areas in their region where they've constructed before. Soil type for different areas of the community. Um, if if there's areas where that have been fit they were filled previously. Again, all of this is there's a certain level of no local knowledge that might come into this. Um, and again, this is generally one where at least this time of year we're into December. If this is happening in December, there's not that it's impossible, but there's certain other considerations that are important to be um, I guess, thought of at this point. So just as an example, like this is just an example of these are some footings. Um, Again, a small excavation in this instance, uh, and the footing forms prior to any concrete being poured, when a person can complete an inspection. So just as an example, what it might look like at this point for inspection. Foundation. So generally, you could consider this that prior to backfill being installed, foundation formwork. Um, I mean, generally at this point, like your foundations would be um, poured, like depending on I guess the type of installation. If you're into a wood foundation, if you're into ICF poured concrete, like there's a number of different applications, but um, generally if you're into that ICF or poured concrete, there may generally you're going to require reinforcement. So again, that should be verified. Um, Height, size as far as thickness, um, weeping tile placement, so they're your drainage tile. So again, as an example, um, here's an example of this is an ICF insulated concrete form where you have a crawl space, a drainage membrane on the exterior of the crawl space. Let's see, I can. There we go. There we go. ICF foundation wall, drainage layer on the outside, weeping tile, drainage tile uh, on the around I guess the height of the footing, and covered with granular material. Again, weeping tile also covered with a sock to prevent um, clogging soil, anything like that from getting in, and covered with granular. Um, and generally would be backfilled, as you can see with this one. Not a lot of as far as excavation. There's a bit of water around this example, but generally you'd backfill at this point. Generally a certain depth to make sure that the footings are protected from freezing. And again, that all depends on the design, the region, the territory, the code that's being followed. Generally speaking, from my experience for most of these designs, um, an example like this, like you'd have a wood frame floor on top of this. Um, Generally speaking, the designer's going to want the wood frame floor installed before backfilling. Like you're not just going to backfill it at this point. Um, Basically, that wood frame, in this example, a wood frame floor installed is providing what's called lateral support. That lateral support is what's making uh, the top of the foundation wall, preventing from any type of collapse or shifting after backfill has been installed. The type of backfill material, again, the designer or the First Nation community might not want organic material from site used as backfill. Maybe they're going to want granular, maybe they're going to want different type of soil brought in. So again, that's where you'd be verifying that it's on site, that it's planned to be used for that purpose, that it's planned to be used for backfill. And again, this would be one where, if you're there for those certificate of code compliance prior to backfill, somewhere around here is when you'd be there to inspect that installation. Framing, so like a wood frame, right? Wood frame type installation uh, should be completed on the installation of rough framing, floor system, exterior walls, interior walls, roof. Make sure that the framing complies with the applicable code, the sizing of framing members, the spacing, nailing, notching, drilling, any of that stuff. Um, Engineered components. So if you have like a engineered floor system, wood eyes, uh, beams, LVL beams, any of that sort of stuff. Generally, they're going to come. They should come with their own specifications on spacing, notching, allowable notching, drilling for floor members, any of that sort of stuff. And that should be available on site. That should be, I guess, provided for the person completing the inspection, so that they have that information. Um, to ensure that those components are installed correctly. Something else would be like roof trusses. You've engineered roof trusses on top of your exterior walls. Again, that should come with that designer information, that those engineered specifications, spacing, location of the members, and specifically like bracing, right? So that the designer design them. They should be braced in a certain way, and that's all in their trust drawings, and should be available for the person completing the inspections. Some communities might want like windows and doors installed at this point, again, just to maybe close the unit up, close it up prior to winter weather or anything like that. Just get it closed up as much as they can. And again, something else to consider. Fire separations. So again, at this point, if you're going to have those vertical fire separations between unit, something that the inspector would be looking at this point, but they might need to return to once you got drywall installed, if they required multiple layers of drywall, any of that type of installation. So again, just as an example, again, a single family dwelling roof. This one has shingles on it. Uh, there's no landing. So again, that's uh, I guess, case by case type basis of the person or entering the unit. Um, I've heard of inspectors that won't enter the unit unless there's land, like there's um, for safety, right? So again, that's something to consider. For this instance, you can see engineered trusses, exterior walls, interior walls, rough openings. There's um, a number of components that a individual or person provide completing the inspection would be looking at this point. Um, I guess one thing to consider, so like I mentioned, access to inside, but inside of the unit. But another thing would be um, if there's multiple stories, access to those other stories. So if there's a basement, if there's single story and then a basement below, or if it's two stories, um, again, it's all dependent on the inspector how their comfort level is, but generally speaking, they're not going to be traversing ladders to go from one story to the next. Stairs would form part of framing, form part of that construction. So there generally would be a set of stairs in, and again, those builders are going to be utilizing those stairs throughout the construction process. So um, just something to consider. Rough in. So again, it's kind of lumping a number of, I guess, type of inspections together. Um, you consider heating, ventilation, air conditioning, HVAC, uh, plumbing. So plumbing, drainage piping, supply piping, and electrical. Again, I'm not the one inspecting compliance for electrical as far as wiring, as far as location of outlets, type, any of that sort of stuff. I'm only inspecting what I'm qualified to and what's listed in the code that I'm qualified to inspect to. Um, so I mean, again, I'm sure as everyone's pretty familiar with, uh, most of these trades are kind of working on top of each other, as so to say, and throughout the project. So they're not always done at the same time. They're not always done so that you can go and inspect all of these rough ends at the same time. It might require multiple visits. So plumbing, I mean, if you're there for plumbing, maybe the HVAC's not done, so you'd have to go back for that. So it's just something to consider. But I guess the important thing is that you're there to inspect these before anything's concealed, before anything's um, I guess covered insulation barrier, that type of thing. So electrical here, just an example. I know sometimes this is a sticker uh, from the Electrical Safety Authority here in Ontario showing that this was inspected by their inspector. Just kind of showing an example. Like, sometimes they'd have it near the front door, like just showing that it's inspected. Sometimes they have it on the panel. Um, but again, that's not necessarily, I'm not the one inspecting wiring, any of that sort of stuff. Just again, what I'm qualified to inspect. So location of smoke alarms, interconnected, those types of things. And I guess again for this instance, so this is again an electrical box on an exterior wall. So they have plastic installed before installing, the box and the wiring. That's something I'm looking for because that's something that they're going to need once they're insulating and installing, the 6 mil poly air barrier. Um, so that's something that's installed by the electrician, but it should be installed at this point before they're, uh, proceeding with insulation. For this example, this is plumbing. So again, plumbing installed in interior walls, drainage piping. I guess for anyone not familiar, this is ABS piping used for drainage and venting. This larger, like 3-inch vertical stack here is generally like a main stack that you'd see in a unit. You can see these nailing plates installed These are there to protect these pipes from drywall screws or nails from people hanging pictures or TV or something like that. So um, those are important to make sure that those are installed uh, where damage can occur. Again, they're inspecting the type of pipe, the connections, the size of the pipe. Again, it's got to be glued. It's got to be um, all that sort of stuff. This example is like this is a crawl space. So again, this is underneath, so it's tight. Everything's tied together. You can see the blue and the red PEX piping. So that's water supply. Like that's the water that's going to the fixtures. And then the black is the drainage. That's what's draining from the fixtures. Um, Size of the pipe, connections, cleanouts, support, all that sort of stuff. This example is specific to HVAC. So if anybody participated a few weeks ago, we had a session on HRV maintenance. So the HRV there, um, all the duct work that's installed, furnace, forced air furnace. So again, once this is installed, there's even a little bit here you can kind of see. So there's duct work installed in the crawl space. So whether it's supply from the furnace or ventilation for the HRV, generally should be inspected. Might I think you can see on a few instances here it's like taped. Making sure it's taped, making sure it's again supported. Um, Size it should all be specified by the designer that they're the correct size, that the trunk is the correct size, all that sort of stuff. Insulation and vapor. So to me, this is a very crucial stage of construction, a very crucial stage of inspection, and that this is your chance to make the home airtight, make it sealed, make it energy efficient in that way. So inspecting air vapor barrier, um, insulation, our value of insulation, a type of insulation, all that sort of stuff. So again, this is one where if you're there for the uh, prior to drywall stage, generally this is the point. And again, very important to be there for this stage. So for this example, you can see bat insulation installed, 6 mil poly with acoustical sealant um, around, I guess, penetrations around these windows, around where it's sealed to the poly on the ceiling. Um, I believe these are the airtight boxes. So there's a gasket on there so that when there's drywall installed, uh, generally would create a seal in those instances. So they may not have the poly that we saw earlier. Um, our bad insulation is going to have information on the R value, the type of insulation, everything like that. The one thing I will say that I do see pretty frequently that I think is very important is that when it's installed, you can kind of see here the insulation is puffy. It's holding air. That's how it works. That's how it's supposed to function. That's how it does what it's supposed to do. So you can almost see it's puffy in the cavity, and it's almost pushing that 6 mil poly, uh, in this case, inward. You don't want the insulation stuffed in and packed uh, as much as possible. It does its job by holding air and filling that cavity with air and the insulation. If you just stuff it flat, it doesn't do the job it's supposed to do. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And also, you want to make sure that there's a constant contact on the face of this insulation, on this bad insulation, and the back of that poly, of that 6 mil poly. You don't want cavities or gaps around outlets or pipes or anything like that. Um, so this is another one. So these would be electrical wires that are penetrating through a interior wall, top plate of an interior wall. Um, so any of those are uh, generally providing a spot for air leakage. So in this instance, they're filled with foam. Maybe they're filled with acoustical sealant. Maybe they're filled with caulking. But again, that's something that I'm looking for at this point to make sure that that's done. So that could be a plumbing pipe. That could be electrical wires. It could be a number of applications, but they generally should be sealed. And again, this is one where an inspector should be on site for that prior to drywall stage of inspection if you require that certificate of code compliance. Mhm. Final inspection. So again, this is um, generally one where if I'm there, if I'm going back, it's generally may occur over multiple visits if there's uh, deficiencies or just progress. So this is the health and safety components, handrails, guards, stairs, uh, um, again, electrical HVAC, smoke alarms, plumbing, appliances that are operating, hot water, all that type of stuff, finish grade. So again, backfill was done, however many 5, 6 stages ago, whatever it was. But if there's a finished grade, if there's a final grading that's not yet done, this is one where maybe that doesn't if this is happening in this time of year, they're probably not going to do finished grading. They might do that in the spring, right? So it's not necessarily that it's not done, it's just not done yet. So it's a progress type of thing, but it should be done. And if it should be done prior to occupancy, but there's instances where you'd have to, I guess, make that as a consideration. Handrails, guards, stairs, smoke alarms, like there's really no way around that. That's an occupancy thing. That's something that has to be done before anybody's occupying these buildings. All those systems and I guess safety features should be implemented. They should be um, installed prior to anyone occupying the building, right? HRV, uh, furnace, hot water heater, any of that stuff that has owner's manuals, right? Any of those appliances that have owner's manuals, they should be available. They should be left on site, should be left in the unit and available for the occupant or the First Nation housing department. So if in case they ever need them, they have to order parts. They have to maintain the HRV that we talked about a few weeks ago. Um, that's all going to be in those owner's manuals, and they're very important that they remain on site with the appliances. I mean, testing of smoke alarms. I mean, it's one thing to have the smoke alarms installed. Sometimes they'll have the kind of the sock around them or the tape when they're installed during construction so that they're not damaged or going off all the time during construction. But before anybody moves in, I'm testing them. I want to make sure that they work. I want to hear that they work. I want to see that the visual signaling component is activating. So I'm testing them. I'm there testing them, making sure that I can hear. If I'm testing it in the living room, that they're activating in the bedroom, that I can hear that they're doing what they're supposed to do. Exterior finish, so that again, that's your siding, but it's also if there's like caulking, right? Caulking on the outside that has to be done. Again, that might be maybe it's done at the time of installation, but if there's penetrations that have been made that weren't there at the time of installation. Maybe there's a couple that have to be cleaned up at the final or in the spring. Um, Warranties again, anything that's warranted in the home, anything that's appliances or not fixtures or appliances, any of that type of stuff. That information should be available. Manuals we talked about, modular home. So again, all of that information on the unit, where it was built, where it was manufactured, those inspections, any of that sort of stuff, that it meets CSA uh, standard CSA 8227, that it meets and it was constructed to meet that standard, that it's available, that it's should be provided as part of the installation, as part of the package. Um, and again, I guess, depending on who's the one completing the inspection, the septic system or the electrical, um, whoever that individual is, generally it may not be the same person that's completing those other stages, but any inspection reports, any of that information should be provided as well, showing that it was inspected and that it passed the inspection. So that should also be made available as part of the, um, I guess, final. Uh, I think that is all that I have for everybody today. Uh, I guess I want to start by saying thank you to everybody for your interest and for your participation here today. Um, I just did share the slides in a PDF in the chat. So if you have access to the chat, that they are available there. And I'll also be sending them out, sharing them with everybody. That you have the slides. Um, and also the recording, again, will be made available if anybody wasn't able to join, if anybody had to take off, that it will be available for everyone to watch again uh, on our YouTube channel and make sure everybody has access to that information. I want to say thank you for your participation and thank you to CMHC for sponsoring, for their support of this session. If anybody has any feedback, anybody has any questions, anybody has any interest in other topics you might want to hear about in the future, please let me know.